and thanks for joining me. If you've been watching the last few videos, you'd have seen a bit of my summer travels through Europe. And while I still have more to share from that road trip, I know a lot of you are here for glimpses of everyday life here in Turkey. So today I thought I'd take you along on a recent visit to my in-laws' village in Konya province. We arrived in the village on a quiet morning, and as always, a few curious cats hurried around to welcome us. My in-laws were preparing a little breakfast, and Fig was happy to be back in the village, as she knows this is where she gets the most treats from her Baba Anne, who can't say no to this cute little face. With fall settling in, the air had turned crisp, but we enjoyed one last breakfast outside in the garden before it got too chilly. After breakfast, it was time to get to work. With the cooler days settling in, my in-laws were busy harvesting what was left in the garden. Peppers were picked and sliced, then laid on the rooftop to dry in the sun. Later, they'll be ground into pul biber, the chili flakes that add warmth to so many Turkish dishes. My father-in-law also tended to a spread of drying pumpkin seeds, carefully turning them by hand to take advantage of the last days of warm sun and the dry air in this area of Turkey. The family home here is quite old and certainly needs repairs, but it's interesting to note the unique ways that it was built with its old mud bricks and thatched roof. Each visit to the village seems to start with a tour of the garden harvest for that year. My father-in-law happily shows what the season's hard work produced. Strings of peppers, still basking in the sun, dozens of little reused plastic baggies filled with dried bits of various fruits and veggies, and jars and bottles lined up in the storage room filled with all sorts of pickled and preserved items. Most of it feels familiar, but sometimes there's a surprise, like the dried okra I hadn't seen before. But one part never changes: his excitement and the pride in what they've produced. Kind of like a squirrel hiding their nuts, they have tucked away things for winter, slowly and steadily. Many of my husband's family still come back to the village, and the women often cook together in bulk. On this day, I visited a family member's home to participate in pasta making. After the dough had been rolled out into large circles, it was lightly heated on this sort of electric grill before being laid out to dry and cool down. Both young and old took part in the process, and after the dough was cut into large strips, everyone took part in trimming them down into small, uniform pieces. It was a slow process, but one that didn't take too much concentration. making it easy to chit-chat with one another, so it was the perfect group activity. After the pasta was made, some of the girls took me outside to tour the garden. If you can't tell already, the village gardens are a real source of pride. Of course, many of the items are things that I'd find in my parents' garden back in the US, but each is suited to their own tastes and cuisine. For example, my family never grew leeks, but I often see them in gardens here and being sold at the farmer's market. The younger girls used this time with me to practice their English, and after knowing them for so many years, it's so interesting to see how much they've improved. Back in the home, dinner was being prepared for all of the ladies who took part in the pasta making. Another popular group cooking activity that takes place in the village is making yufka. Yufka is a large, dried flatbread that stores for a long time, and all you really need to do is just add some water to it to bring it back to life. Now, normally the pasta we made would have been dried for longer before going into jars for later use. But of course, we had to test what we'd worked on all afternoon. The old house was busy with activity once again, each woman working on a dish and preparing a feast that seemed to come together in an instant. A lot of these village homes are quite old, and the grandmas and grandpas that still live in them seem to be perfectly content without a lot of the modern conveniences. Often their children and grandchildren come back from the big cities to visit, cook, and help around the home. No one seems to miss what wasn't there. They always have what they need and know exactly how to use it. After filling dinner, we all lingered a little longer waiting for a few rounds of tea. Turkish tea may not necessarily be elegant or fussy in a formal sense, but it is still a ritual. Everyone has their own little touch on it and preferences, but regardless if you take it light or dark, with or without sugar, it seems to be almost universally loved throughout Turkey. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this little video. I really appreciate it. I have more to share with you from the village, so if you'd like to see more from my perspective as an American living in Turkey, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and giving this video a thumbs up. Until next time, thanks!